What is the future of GitOps and platform engineering, and where does Argo fit in? Plus, why you shouldn't be using parameter overrides in Argo CD applications, all today on Argo Unpacked. Welcome to another wonderful episode, episode 17. Today, we're going to be joined by Michael Crenshaw, who's the Argo CD project lead. Very excited to bring him in. We're going to do that in a minute. And of course, my co-host, Ravital, who will be joining us. But before I bring them in, we've got a couple of things going on in the Argo project that we want to cover and talk about. And we're actually going to talk about more of that news a little bit later. But obviously, Argo CD 3.2 coming out. RC is coming out. You're going to be wanting to try that. There's a couple of new features that are coming on, plus a nasty bug that we were able to fix before it became an issue for the users. A lot of people don't realize how many things we get fixed before the project new release comes out. Obviously, a lot going on the security perspective. And of course, next week is ArgoCon and KubeCon going to be happening in Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you there. So hopefully you'll tune in and talk to us. Now, before I bring in Michael to talk to us, and we're going to talk about the future of GitOps and platform engineering, and there is a lot going on in that space, a lot happening with environment promotion, application promotion. There's a lot that people are asking from the community, so we're going to get into it. But before we get into that, I want to share an Argo tip this week about using parameter overrides in Argo CD. A lot of people are doing it wrong today, and they may not necessarily realize it. So what are parameter overrides? In Argo CD, you define a source of truth, usually in Git. You define a destination, usually a Kubernetes cluster and a namespace. In fact, always a Kubernetes cluster and a namespace. And then you can set different parameters for your application. Sync parameters like I want this, they're basically sync policy, sorry. You set sync policy as well. So auto sync or manual sync, how you want it to be diffed. There's all these kinds of little parameters. And then there are parameter overrides. So if you're using something like a Helm application, you can specify values in the application manifest that you would like to go into the manifest generation of that Helm chart. So what does that mean? Well, it means that when you create your Helm chart, you always have a values file. So the chart is a template. Your values file is defining what values you want to use in that template. And the way that most people do it is they have their Helm chart either in a separate Helm repository or sitting inside of a Git folder. And then they have a values file that's sitting in their Git repo that specifies all of the ways that all the values that should go into that templating experience. And when you run an Argo CD application, it's going to run the Helm template command to generate raw manifests that it can use to apply to Kubernetes and then do diffing and handle all of that diffing work. Now, we actually recommend that you don't use parameter overrides on the application because it creates a split source of truth, a split confusing source of truth that you have. If you have the values set in Git, then you can do a diff on those values. You can set branch controls. You can set all kinds of parameters for how those values are going to be handled. But when you set those values as part of the Argo application, while it's very convenient to do that when you create the application, it also means that when you go to render your Helm chart locally, you now no longer have a way to do that. So let me say that again. If you go to render that Helm chart locally, run the Helm template command, those values that are part of the override of the application are no longer available to you. You have to go and manually create those, pull them out, create those values, and then you can regenerate exactly what Argo CD is doing. So it makes it difficult to figure out, to actually replicate what's going on that Argo CD application, the configuration that you're using. It also makes it difficult to handle promotions. Inside of GitOps Promoter, or I should say inside of GitOps Cloud, the GitOps promotion engine, it works off of the source manifests of a repository. And inside of GitOps Promoter from the project from Intuit that Michael's been working on, it also works on the source of the Git repository. And so if you need to modify the application, you would need to do some extra work and parameterization at some other level of abstraction. And maybe Michael will correct me if he comes on, when he comes on. But you'll have to do that extra work to make that work with parameter overrides. So it makes it difficult to replicate exactly what's going on in your application. It makes it difficult to do promotions, and it causes all kinds of issues when you go to actually scale and use Argo CD at a higher scale. It means that when you look at Git, you can't just rebootstrap your application from what's available in the manifests. And all of the Git controls and parameters, they're no longer available as well. So it's a really good idea to not use those parameter overrides and instead stick those things in a values file and throw them in your Git repo so you don't have to worry about it. So that's advice number one. Now, there is a little bit of a tweak that I'll add. If you're using application sets, that is a way of programmatically generating applications. When you generate those applications, it's very easy from the generators that you're using. Let's say you're using a cluster generator or you're using a Git generator. You can pass parameters from that generator in as overrides in your template. And that's an area where it makes more sense because you're saving so much time by using an application set, because you're generating these applications dynamically, that you would actually take advantage of the parameter overrides there. However, I would challenge you to go and look at your templating and look at each of the parameter overrides that you're doing in an application set and ask if it wouldn't be better if they were sitting in the Git repo alongside the manifests that you have. Would it not be better to have a values file there? Because often it is. And so we do challenge people to see if they can move more of those things into their manifest Git repository, because they'll have a better experience with generally everything GitOps. But there is definitely a use case for why you would want to use parameter overrides as part of an application set. So your Argo tip of the week is you're probably abusing parameter overrides in Argo CD applications. You should probably stop. We'll throw a blog post into the links. We have one up at codefresh.io/blog that Kostas put together on 30 different anti-patterns that we see. And one of the patterns that we see is the abuse of parameter overrides. And it does cause issues, especially when you go back to rebootstrap your applications from the manifest that you have in a Git repo. That source of truth is now split between different things. So it becomes a problem. So that's your tip of the week. Stop abusing parameter overrides. You'll be happier for it. Of course, we've got a lot of other great news to celebrate right now this week. I don't know if you realize, but Argo Unpacked just passed 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we are getting popular. We appreciate it. If you like the show, if you like the podcast, like and subscribe, share it with your friends, post out your favorite clips, and even just make a comment. Let us know what you liked about it. Let us know if there's something you want us to cover in future episodes. We'll be watching the chat as we go through today. I see there's already some conversation going on in there. So Laurent is saying, maybe you should show an example of what a parameter override looks like, because people might not realize what you're talking about. This is mostly an audio show, so we don't do too much of showing, but maybe I can pull up an Argo instance here really quick and show you what I'm talking about if I can get logged in. I don't know. I didn't set up to do it, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if I go to create here, we'll do it. We'll do it right now because Laurent said he wants us to. We're going to do it very briefly. And even if you're listening on the audio, it shouldn't be too funky. So I'm going to grab my example application repository. So I've got my Argo instance up. I'm just going to use the default project. I'm going to leave it on manual sync because I'm not even going to sync it in the end. And I'm going to set my path here to Helm. I should have one sitting. Actually, probably want this on. Get my pathing up here. So I'm going to grab a Helm chart. Copy my path. Boom. Okay. So I've got my Helm chart here, and it should pop up with my. It looks like it's not refreshing here, so it's not showing my. It's not showing the parameters that are part of this Helm chart yet. So I'd have to fiddle with it. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to YOLO do it. Gosh darn it. You tricked me, Laurent, to try to go do it without having looked at it for a second beforehand, and I don't want to spend the time on it. But basically, there'll be an option here that shows up to do parameter overrides. And if I go to overrides, if I go to the documentation, we can just look at it too. Even be an easier way to do it. So yeah, you can also set them as part of the CLI when you're setting values, and you can set them also for customize, right? You can override specific values that you want to set. But basically, all of the values that are available in a Helm chart values file will show up as available parameter overrides. So once those are there, people will start filling them in and putting stuff in. And of course, if you do that, you will be in all of the issues that we talked about earlier. So anyway, there you go. That's a basic outline of the parameter overrides. Thanks, Laurent, for convincing me to try to go and look at it live. So before we get into, we're going to bring on Michael and Ruvital, but celebrating the fact that we've got 1,000 subscribers. Again, go share the show. We appreciate it, and let us know what you'd like to hear about in the future. So let me bring in Ruvital and Michael. So Ruvital is the co-host of Argo Unpacked. Welcome.
Hey.
And Michael Crenshaw is the Argo CD project lead and has been for, I want to say, almost 2 years now, Michael?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Michael got the job because he showed up and was the most prolific of any maintainer anybody had ever seen. He has an uncanny ability to review 50 or 60 pull requests in a week. And I don't know how he does it, because it's not like if I tried to review 50 or 60 pull requests, I'd be like, looks good to me, looks good to me, looks good to me. But you go through them line by line and you give really good feedback for people and you challenge them when they've maybe built something in a funky way, and you've been a really good guardian and steward of the project. And we really appreciate you taking the lead role. About 2 years ago, and still going strong. So thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Shout out to Intuit for paying my bills so that I can actually do all that work.
And as a side note, I have 2 PRs. So if you can, after the show, take a look, that would be fantastic.
For sure.
Yeah, speaking of, get to work over
Exactly.
So first of all, Ruvital, we've got KubeCon coming up next week, ArgoCon in Atlanta. I've never been to Atlanta. I don't think you have either.
I haven't.
Michael, are you familiar with Atlanta? Do you have the inside scoop there?
Well, I've been there a couple times, but not exactly the inside scoop. I know they like peaches.
Okay, peaches. All right, we'll look for peaches.
So for me, it's the second time I'm going to attend ArgoCon. And I was actually looking at our previous episodes, episode number 3. We did a whole episode about ArgoCon and KubeCon. And I think it was a perfect preparation for me. I was attending the first time. I was overwhelmed. I felt a lot of FOMO all the time because there were many sessions. Each session is 10 minutes long. And the tips that I got from this, I'll throw the link. There you go. I think that the tips I got were amazing because the FOMO feeling was less stressful. And I know that everything was recorded, so I could go ahead and check out whatever I've missed. But one thing that I remember is when I saw the agenda and I saw that every session is 10 minutes only, I looked at the first ArgoCon. I think it was 2021, unless I'm wrong. The sessions back then were 40 minutes, at least 40 minutes each session. What happened? How come we changed them? And I know what happened, right? But it's really interesting to see that from 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, 40 minutes was the minimum session, to 10 minutes of sessions. It's like I see, how we scroll down.
No, we still have longer sessions.
But
like the normal sessions are
30
20
minutes.
25 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 25. So they're not 10.
But we have
There are
many
lightning
sessions.
talks.
Yeah, but it's so different, right? What does it mean? What does it tell about us as human beings?
You're worried that we've TikTokified ArgoCon?
I'm not worried. We
No,
had, right?
no, I think it was really we did used to have some 35 or 40-minute sessions, and now we do what 25 minutes is like the standard session length now at ArgoCon. And we just found that with a lot of those there was more Q&A at the end.
True.
And sometimes there wasn't that much Q&A. Sometimes it was like, oh, that was great, thank you, and then we'd kind of have a little bit of dead space. And at the same time, a lot of the people that want to do Q&A want to go and talk to the speaker kind of one-on-one and explain their scenario. And so we found that 25 minutes worked, because then when they went to the Q&A, the speaker could just go off the stage, step out, and if people needed to talk to them, they can go and talk to them. And then we could cover more topics, right? We could fit an extra,
so like
30%
teasers, small
session.
teasers. And if you want to go deep dive, you go ahead and chat with the person who gave the talk. And that was actually one of your tips. It's like, yeah, we have a lot of sessions, which is great, but the in-between sessions, the conversations in between sessions, these are the most interesting discussions.
Yeah, we call it the hallway track.
Yes.
Yeah, the hallway track is always the best track, because that's where you talk to, like, there'll be people that are going to be presenting at ArgoCon. I actually we should have pulled up the list of presenters and the companies and stuff, because there's a lot of great companies and end users and stuff that are going to be presenting. But those are all people that have approval to talk about the stuff they're talking about, right? But in the hallway track, you get conversations from people who don't have approval to talk about what they're talking about. And some of those are really fun. And I remember one, the very first DockerCon, this is a story I always tell. Michael's, I'm sure you've heard it now a dozen times, but we were sitting there talking. It was the night the DockerCon was held the night before the election in 2016. Yeah, 2016. So real big deal election to set the stage. And we're talking to some folks from USA Today. I don't think they would mind if I told this story now. And we were like, oh, how are you going? Are you adopting Kubernetes? And they were like, we pushed everything to production yesterday for Kubernetes. We switched everything to Kubernetes. And we're like, you did it 2 days before your biggest news day of the 4 years. And they were like, yeah, YOLO, we were going to make it happen. So that was like a really cool, and we got to talk to them about their implementation and what they were thinking of. And they're like, that right there, that story in the moment of 2016 told us more about the pull of Kubernetes than all the talks we'd seen all day. Right. So the hallway track ends up being awesome. I don't know, Michael, do you have any awesome hallway experiences that you're not under NDA to share?
Oh, good question. I think a lot of the really good conversations have come from just bumping into Kubernetes maintainers, or just open source maintainers in general, who I generally wouldn't have any reason to chat with. And you just get into topics that, since no one's sitting there telling you, oh, you're going to talk about this now, or this is the track, they can be very off the wall. I've had really great conversations with a fellow who created YAML. And I sat with several of my teammates, and we just like went back and forth on different design components of YAML and what we liked and didn't like. And it was a lot of fun. So yeah, hit the hallway track for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Rovital, any other tips that you thought were helpful for you when you were your first timer?
I think that one of the tips that I got was, I went while at KubeCon, I went to the Argo booth, and I didn't have specific questions, but there was a huge line all the time, huge line with people coming and asking some questions. So I was just standing there listening to the questions and to the discussions, and I gained a lot of things. It was super, super interesting.
Yeah, and there will be an Argo project booth at Atlanta. So come hang out with us. The maintainers are going to be there, and we'll be rotating. So if you come by and you don't see the person you want to talk to, you can probably come by an hour later or just ask, and you'll find out there's like a schedule we maintainers share to figure out when we're going to be there. But we've got that. I think Octopus Deploy obviously will have a booth, and Rivital and I will be hanging out there. And I think Michael Intuit has a booth at both ArgoCon and KubeCon again this year, right?
Yep, lots of booth duty.
Yeah, so maybe part of the reason we like the hallway track the best is because it's the only track that we get to go to for 80% of the conference.
Correct.
And I have one thing. I'm planning to basically chit chat with people about Argo. So if you have any tip you want to share, look for me. I want to make a lot of shorts and get basically a lot of tips out of this KubeCon conference and publish them. So if you have anything useful, anything you want to share, any tip you think it's one of the best tips you can share with others, come and find me.
Yeah, and actually Rivital and I are going to be doing a live mini episode of Argo Unpacked at the Octopus booth. There's a demo theater, and we're going to be doing that, I think, on day 1 or day 2. So don't miss that. There'll be lots going on. Come check it out. Great chance to meet people. Great chance to learn a lot of stuff. And of course, we'd love to have you present as well. ArgoCon EU CFP is now closed, so you're too late if you didn't do it. It was due yesterday, so you just missed it if you were planning to do that. But if you want to present for KubeCon North America next year, the opportunity is open. And of course, there are lots of other things. So if you're interested in speaking, feel free to reach out. If you just want to shoot the breeze, you can reach out through the Argo Unpacked social media channels, or you can get me on X at Today Was Awesome. And then we mentioned Argo CD 3.2 coming out shortly. I think we already have the release blog for it. Came out a little while ago. Do we have the release candidate already for this?
We've got release candidates, but not the GA release.
Okay.
I need to cut that release actually after this.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Are you planning to do it today?
Yep, planning to do it today. I'm gonna do a recording of the process, and that'll be something that other maintainers will get to do in the future. It's fun to push the buttons.
Did we get the Git fix in that that Yevgeny was working on?
Good question. There were a few last minute suggestions for that change, and I don't know whether those have been buttoned up. I think there was basically consensus that we could get away with the GA release without that particular bug fix. And then we would just quickly do 3.2.1. But if we can get it into the GA, even better.
It looks like, oh yeah, I can see there's a lot of activity on it. It looks like Leo just gave it a thumbs up and an approval. So it's probably ready to merge. I actually was thinking that we should actually fix this. So for people that don't have context, this is a bug that is kind of elusive, but basically Git, the library, like the binary, like the actual binary that we ship in Argo CD, upgraded to a new version, and they included a way where they took some of the cleanup background processes that Git runs and they moved them into the background. And that meant that when it failed or got stuck, it was not detected by Argo CD. So the bug is that every once in a while, repo server would lock up, and basically you wouldn't be able to render applications because there was a Git lock sitting there. And when that happened, the only way to fix it was to restart Git repo. And it was incredibly hard to reproduce because you're basically looking for random failures that could happen to a background process of Git. And Yevgeny, who's on the OSS team at Octopus Deploy, actually
the one and only
eBPF to this thing, and he went deep on it. And we, by the end of like a couple of weeks, we had like 5 or 6 people looking at this bug, and Yevgeny finally figured out that it was because of a backgrounding of a Git process that was failing and leaving a lock in place. So anyway, looks like it's ready to go now. I see Leo's giving the thumbs up. So I think it's just waiting on you, Michael, if you decide to merge it in. But if it still needs work, let us know and we'll get it fixed.
Cool. Yeah. Huge shout out for getting that done. So much of open source is one person just decides to take a deep dive, and that was the case here. So very much appreciated.
Yeah, and 3.2, I think we did we already do an episode about what was big in 3.2? Did we already talk about it? on Argo Unpacked?
We didn't have a full episode about it, but I think we had a bunch of mentions from you.
This is one that I think Nitish led, right, Michael? And it was his first time being a release manager. So love to see people coming up on the project and doing a lot more. I know there was some cool features added to support GitOps Promoter from Intuit. So the project that you've been working on, Michael. So that's valuable. I know there's new deletion strategy for progressive sync that solves. There's some funkiness depending on how people were using progressive sync, where when it went to go and delete components, it would do them in the wrong order and things would get stuck. And so that's a great improvement. I know there's a lot of work that was done on Hydrator, which is another project that you've really been leading, Michael. Is Hydrator, do you think, ready for people to start treating as more GA? I think it's not. I think it's still beta API, right? Or is it still alpha?
Still alpha. I think it's definitely worthy of folks trying on maybe some lower risk applications. I mean, at Intuit, we're using it currently to deploy Argo CD itself, and it's been behaving well. But there are potentially some significant features we're going to add in 3.3. And we just want to make sure that things are really, really stable before moving it up to beta. Red Hat has indicated interest in moving it along to beta, so hopefully we'll get a little bit extra help on any, I think there may be 1 or 2 dangling bugs to knock out there, but it's in really good shape. I really recommend giving it a try.
We were also talking about moving progressive sync up to beta. Is that going to be done in 3.2 or is that coming after 3.2?
I think that'll happen in 3.3.
Okay.
The drive for that came after the RCs have been released, and we try not to move much stuff after the first RC.
I think the feature that I'm probably most excited for in 3.2 is server-side diff support from the CLI. That's a really cool feature to be able to do server-side diffing. We've talked about this before, and this might go into our platform engineering discussion, but within Argo CD or within Kubernetes, there's really 3 levels of diff. There's the dry manifest before they're rendered. There's the rendered manifest or the wet manifest, which Hydrator is doing. And then there's this server-side manifest, which may be actually different than what you've rendered. And so being able to do a server-side diff, really valuable, and allows you to cover kind of that last 5% mile of diffing.
Yeah, and my teammates Leo and Peter have put in a ton of work solidifying server-side diff over the last few months, a couple months. And they will have a talk about all the nitty-gritty details at ArgoCon, so be sure to catch that.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Also, the first release where we've had GitOps engine merged into Argo CD. We used to be a separate project, separate repository, and that's a work that Leo and Pat, Leo from Intuit and Pat from Octopus Deploy put a lot of work into. So that's going to make everybody's lives easier when they go to continue contributing. So,
yep.
Awesome. Great news on Argo CD 3.2 coming out. Sounds like either today or tomorrow. So get your hands on that, folks, and start trying it out. Check out some of those new features. And again, we'll post the link to the blog post in the chat so that people can read up on that 3.2 release. And then, of course, we'll start working on 3.3. And we've got KubeCon Amsterdam in next March. So we're going to come into EU. And then North America next year just got moved to Salt Lake. Is that right?
Back to your neck of the woods.
I can't believe that. I've been going to KubeCon for 10 years now. And they went to Salt Lake once, and I thought it was like the craziest thing that could have happened. Because, like, what are the odds they do it in Salt Lake? And then I don't know what was going on, because I think they were supposed to do it in like LA or San Diego or something. And then something happened where it wasn't working. And they're like, actually, we're going to go back to Salt Lake. We found it a great place to be. They loved the mountains, and they loved seeing the Argo Mobile, I think, outside the entrance. And so that must have been the thing that tipped him to bring him back. I
think probably. Yeah. The Argo Mobile, I hope it makes a comeback.
Oh, buddy. Next year, it's going to be a year. All right. So let's get into our conversation. We're going to talk about the future of platform engineering.
And
and
GitOps.
and how Argo CD is part of this. And we're seeing, I think that maybe the natural place that I would start is in promotions, but maybe even to go higher level than that. What I've seen as a pattern, and tell me if this resonates with you, is that every company basically wants to build some kind of internal developer platform. And they're trying to solve the problem of how do we make it easier for people to make changes, get it into production. And a lot of people grab Argo CD off the shelf and they say, hey, like this is a place where people can log in, they can see all their applications, they can go and see the live status of objects, they can look at their logs, they can do debugging, they can do sync operations, they can do deployments. Hey, this is basically my platform engineering strategy here in a box. And that's why Argo CD already has 50 to 60% of the Kubernetes market is using Argo CD today. It blows my mind. That's crazy. That's huge. That's a very dominant. Could you imagine if 60% of the cars on the road were one brand? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So this is pretty big. But that's probably the natural place that I would start, is that everybody wants to build kind of an IDP, and Argo CD is a natural part of that. And then, of course, the problem that we've all been chasing this last 18 months or so is really around GitOps promotion. Is that what you're seeing, Michael, or is there a different direction for platform management that you're thinking of?
Well, I think environment promotion is a huge part of it, but not the only part. I think that GitOps, since it's such a simple idea and it plugs into such a well-established ecosystem, it just works really well for so many things that we need to do. But I think that there are a few places where it's either coming up short or it just doesn't happen to be the sole solution to the problem. Environment promotions is a big one. But I think that abstraction might be the other one. And abstraction is weird because how much abstraction you need to do and how you do it depends a lot on how big your organization is. And I kind of split it up into 3 layers. You've got early stage IDPs where you just want to enable your developers. So you give them a Git repository, you let them put Kubernetes manifests in there, maybe you let them use customize, and they kind of do what they want. And that does enable them to do what they want. That works for pretty small orgs. Then you realize, well, I need a little bit of control from the platform perspective. So you do what you mentioned in your Argo tip, which is not ideal. You add things to the Argo application CR that are sort of platform controlled, and you override what the user would do. So you make sure they don't do just whatever they want. They do whatever they want with a few caveats. And then finally, you get into later stages where you really need strong separation of concerns. And that's the scale that Intuit's at. By the time you have 10,000 repositories with manifests in them, you can't let people deploy whatever they want. You have to have certain safeguards, certain compliance requirements come into play. And you got 5 different teams vying for maintaining the information that's in these Git repositories, networking, observability, anything you can name. They all need to have their finger in that pie. And it becomes really difficult to do both platform engineering, abstraction, and GitOps at the same time. And I think that the GitOps ecosystem needs to catch up to helping solve those problems.
Yeah, that's where that abstraction becomes so difficult, because the more you abstract, the less granular control typically, right, that people have. And that's where larger organizations can struggle, because each team has some special needs, right, that they need to do things some specific way or whatever. And so oftentimes I try to, from a technology standpoint, try to solve this with judicious use of application sets, where I can set up rules that are like, hey, if your repo looks like this, here's the outcome of what's going to happen at the end of it. And so if you can just kind of make your repo look like this, you'll be in good shape and you can go and use this thing. But that's only part of the story, because like you said, if you've got 10,000 apps, or let's say you've got 10,000 developers, they all need training. And we talked about this a little bit last week. We were talking about the culture of GitOps. Yeah. And there's in many ways, it is similar to the nature of DevOps, right? DevOps is all about, oh, how do I enable self-service and let people run on their own and be independent? And GitOps is like, yes, do all those things, but build it around the structure of having real-time knowledge about what's deployed, and build it around the structure of controlling things from Git and using declarative. And so it ends up being closer to a roadmap about how to actually implement something that allows you to do that. But like you said, it starts to become very difficult to manage more in a central fashion as you get larger. So obviously you've been working really heavily on doing the hydrator in Argo CD, which is definitely a help. You've also got GitOps Promoter that you've been working on. Do you think we should make the mission of Argo CD larger, or is it more about bringing in more potentially platform additional tools that work really well with Argo?
I think probably more the latter, but I think that the Argo ecosystem is in a really good position to help shape those tools. I think that Argo has really taken off with app developers as opposed to platform engineers. I think it works very well for platform engineers. Deploying infrastructure with Argo CD, fantastic. But app developers love it because they get a beautiful user interface that explains to them the state of their application, and in many cases kind of teaches them Kubernetes. Like a lot of these app developers, you're writing a Java application, you're not a YAML engineer yet. You want something to explain it, and Argo does that really well. So I think that the tooling around how we build abstractions probably needs to improve. I think right now we basically have three options for how we abstract. Either we don't, that is Kubernetes manifests, or customize. Customize isn't really an abstraction tool. It's more of a, last mile tweaking tool, I guess. Mm-hmm. Helm, I think, is basically the de facto deploy time abstraction tool. So by deploy time, I mean you push to Git, and then Argo CD, it's doing the deployment. It runs Helm template, and it takes minimal inputs, blows it up into outputs. That's your abstraction layer. I think that you can layer customize on top of that. I really like the Helm chart inflator feature of customize, so that you can basically tell users, here's your Helm inputs. That's your safe abstraction. Plus you get customize, and that's where you're sort of on your own and, use at your own risk. And then kind of the final abstraction tool is controllers. That's a really high barrier. And I think that's why we don't see a lot of IDPs built on, here is like the Intuit app CRD, because maintaining a Kubebuilder, even with tooling like Crossplane and KRO coming along, it's still a lot to ask to build a controller and maintain it and versioning and all that.
Yeah, I actually had an experience with a company who had they had taken everything in their entire company. This is a large company. I mean, we're talking over 3,000 engineers, and they had made everything into its own CRD with its own operator. So like if you wanted to provision a new web front end, there was like, you just did the CRD and it had an operator that ran it. And this is pre Crossplane, right? Mm-hmm. And so they abandoned that within about 12 months. I think that was so crazy to imagine to do it. And Crossplane gets you closer, right? Because you can make a composite resource and then you just chuck it into Argo CD and you're like, hey, this works pretty well. Like I can build my composite resource. I can leverage things that are outside of Kubernetes if I need to. And that gets you a nice chunk of the way there. But I haven't seen the same level of pickup and adoption of Crossplane that I had expected initially. And I think it's probably driven mostly by people being really bought into Terraform and not seeing the value of a constantly running operator for some of those non-Kubernetes resources. But Ravital, actually, that topic, you and I went over a list of questions that you had before that you were thinking of, and this actually introduces that first question that you had written down.
my first question. My draft has changed so much.
You asked, how do you define the line between declared in Git versus computed at runtime? That one. Do you want to add anything more to that question?
Let me open that because I had many questions about AI that I want to talk about as well.
Maybe we should answer the line between declared in Git versus computed at runtime while you're looking at those AI ones. So Michael, you want to take first swing at it?
Sure. I think that probably moving everything to runtime is not the best idea. I think the things you want calculated at runtime are things that are built on really well-established technology, and that probably means it's not built internally. You're using the native Kubernetes deployment controller or Argo rollouts. You're using really solid resources or CRDs. I think that it makes sense to move most of your internal stuff into being not necessarily declared in Git in the sense that the user is writing it all out, because sometimes you have things that you don't want the user to bother with, like you've got some type of security settings that you automatically apply to deployment on the user's behalf. If you want it to be transparent to the user, I think that deploy time is a great time to do that. You have a Helm chart that automatically adds this platform concern to the manifests. And I think that Source Hydrator is an excellent thing to couple with that because it exposes that platform functionality to the user. And I think sometimes we think of abstraction as being basically equivalent to obfuscation. Like we don't want the users to see what's going on behind the scenes. But I think that abstraction should be an invitation to collaborate. If you're transparent with your users, they understand what's going on. If something's not working well, they can suggest to you how to fix it. So kind of a long way to answer. I think that declaring in Git / using a hydration tool to push to Git, where things are very visible, is really probably the best move for most internal uses.
Yeah, there's the server side stuff. I tend to think of like computed at runtime, like things that application sets do. So if I've got a pull request generator, it's going to be looking and figuring out what pull requests are open, and it will generate the application off of those. And so making a Git commit for every pull request that's generated, that's in addition to the pull request just existing at all, to be like, okay, go create this application, feels not useful. I've already got it in Git. It's already sitting in a pull request. Just go generate the application and leave me alone. And as soon as I deal with it in the pull request, I don't introduce some extra interface. I just deal with the pull request. If I shut it off the pull request, the application gets deleted. We move on with our lives. So stuff like that works really, really well. Cluster generators tend to work really well, though most of those things end up being computed or set inside of Git, right? And then you've got things that are like, where people often want to use it are things that they would use Helm lookups for. And I think Helm lookups have been really abused. And of course, we don't even support them inside of Argo CD directly. You can use a CMP plugin, a config management plugin, to build support for Helm value lookups, which I did, and it's terrible. And so I don't recommend it. But as an experiment to see like, hey, this is what it would look like, and here's how it introduces security problems or whatever. But Helm value lookups, a lot of people will say like, okay, I'm going to create these values on my cluster, and then I can inject these values into my manifest. But Kubernetes already has config maps, secret mounts. And so most of those things should actually just be in secrets. And if you're using something like a secrets operator, external secrets operator, when you update the secret, it can go and actually restart and update the pod so they get the new value. Whereas if you're doing a value lookup and you change the value, you now have to go and recompute the manifests and regenerate them and reapply them. And so you've introduced an extra step. So that's where it gets into like the duplication of effort that is probably not that useful. But yeah, so that was a good question, Ravital, that you wrote down, and that I asked on your behalf, so that because you wrote it down. So thank you.
I want to talk about the state, right? Right now, GitOps is all about syncing the desired state versus the actual state.
Mhm.
So that the desired state is something that is static, and maybe I'm thinking like 5 years going forward, 5 years from now. But do we think that one day we will have something like dynamic state, right? So it's not only about the state that I store in Git, but it also basically, what about performance and cost and compliance?
Mm.
These are all dynamically, they will be changed dynamically, right?
Yeah, we actually already do with something like a horizontal pod autoscaler, where it's changing the number of replicas that exist. That's an example where in Argo CD today, you can set an ignore difference on that field, and you can let an operator run under some parameters. It might have a max, number of pods it can run. So you have some sort of policy set around it, and then it's changing the state. Now, when it comes time to do like a disaster recovery, you're not really worried about getting the replica number right, because your autoscaler is going to go and update that for you. So we do actually have some things like that, but I do think we probably will see more of those kinds of things, right?
Of course. And as we have the AI that is coming and helping us, I'm assuming it will be way, way more sophisticated.
Well, I think that the question ties in really well with discussing GitOps and platform engineering. I've got a really good example from Intuit right now. On top of NumaProj, which is a tool that Intuit open source to do kind of streaming applications and analysis, we have an AI system that monitors applications, and it creates a score, and we call it anomaly score. Either this app looks like it's behaving basically normal, or it looks like it's behaving weird, and maybe we need someone to come intervene, or we want to gate a rollout deployment on that number. But the user can't just really fire and forget with this tool. Sometimes there needs to be some tuning. The exact threshold is something that's more art than science. So I think the way that AI can effectively collaborate with a platform in a really nice way in this case is open a PR, and the AI agent can say, all right, I've done some analysis. I've calculated that the threshold score that makes sense for your application is this. Take a look, read the docs, read the explanation, and then choose to merge it or not. But then you have a record of what the AI is doing. You have a record of a human saying, yep, that makes sense. And then you have it stored in the intent of the application in Git. So that other people can look at it and go, yeah, this is how the application is supposed to be behaving according to these various inputs.
That's actually something that I really want, even more than at the infrastructure level, would be amazing at the user level, right? So like if you say like, oh, like you introduced this new feature, these metrics are doing these things, and I've got a system where I can automatically like look at the different metrics and be like, oh, you introduced this feature that correlates to this thing changing, these metrics changing, and hey, you may not want this one changing this way. That may not be good, and heads up on that. And this one actually is changing in a really great way, and you might be able to improve it by even introducing this additional little feature. And let me go make a PR for that. You can go look at it like that. Like working at like the user level would be really cool. But I don't know that that's the biggest change for that at an operational level. And this is true for all of AI. And I think I submitted a talk about this as well. And Victor and I talked a little bit about it, is that when you are deploying more frequently, which is the output of what we're talking about, when you're deploying more frequently, if you experience the same failure rate, your frequency of failures will increase at a commensurate rate with your increase in deployments, right? So if your failure rate stays at 1%, but suddenly you're deploying 100 times more frequently, you'll experience 100 more times, 100 more failures in a week than you did before. And that becomes a really big deal. So the pressure to get CD really well tuned right? And this is like why I work at Octopus Deploy, right? It's like I look at that problem and I'm like, oh, AI is going to make that problem so much bigger. And we're going to have such a bigger job. We're going to have so many more customers because they need to improve their CD and get it really well tuned, because if they can't reduce, you have to reduce the failure rate. And I don't think anybody else is really focusing on that right now. They're all saying, wow, look at all these productivity gains. But the failure rate hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
So when you do that, then you have to find a way to lower the failure rate.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah, Ravital. So I don't know if that was a satisfactory answer for you.
Who knows? We'll see, right?
Fair point.
Yeah, fair point.
But Michael, I have to say, I like your solution with like the human in the loop. We don't let the machines do everything automatically yet. So there's always a human in the loop that confirm and approve.
Yeah.
No, there's a buildup in the trust phase, just like with Argo CD. Most people, when they first use it, use manual sync.
Yeah.
Because they're like, auto sync. What does that do? But after they click sync and it just works for like the 30th or 40th time, they're like, why am I even in this loop? I'll just sort of switch it to auto. And as long as I built my controls in Git properly, then we're good to go. This thing can just run. That's like the Argo CD singularity. That's when the rules break down and everything moves faster than you could have possibly imagined. Whole new world.
And the product has to build that trust to get you to that point.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like human in the loop workflows are going to be really valuable. Or, at Intuit, we talk a lot about done for you, but I think in early stage, what you want is done with you. You want to build confidence that this tool is behaving the way that you would expect it to, so that at some point you can hand it off. And that's a really great feeling in Argo CD when you can finally hand off the sync operation to be fully automated. And also why I spend so much time on environment promotions, because we've failed to make that possible in the GitOps ecosystem for application delivery, where there are lots of environments involved.
Yeah. And that's where it starts to, like, that's where a lot of people feel it, because they're moving from dev stage production, but then they're moving across regions. I mean, we've got users that are like, hey, I've got to deploy to 3,000 or 30,000 different deployment targets as part of a promotion. And if I don't have a way of managing that at an abstract layer, I'm going to be in trouble. Yeah. To bring it back, Ravital, to your original point about, is there going to be more meta state inside of Kubernetes? And I said there already is, right, with something like an autoscaler. I do think that we will see those kinds of things. We'll see more of those kinds of things, but they're always going to be policy driven, right? So the policy is always going to be around like with a pod autoscaler, it's like, what's the maximum, surge you can do, and like what are my limits on this, and what does my low end look like? And from a policy perspective, that's how you manage that state, right? Is you set some kind of policy, and then you have an automation engine that's going through and tweaking things as needed within that policy. And this is an area where I think one of the reasons that I didn't gravitate towards Flux or want to bring in, let's put it this way. One of the reasons I didn't want to, something I didn't want to bring in from Flux, is that they really had that philosophy of, if any change is ever made, it always needs to be a Git commit. And to me, it always felt like a little too ideological, like making a Git commit because you want to change the pod replica number 35 times a day. It just feels like a bunch of junk in your Git history that's not useful. Like, you have a policy around how many replicas you should have. So just let that be the policy, and then it can go up and down, and you're not really worried about it. If you need to do a disaster recovery, you're fine. But you can delegate things to controllers. I think that's one of the most powerful, important features in Argo CD. And I think it's totally underrated. I think people undervalue that, because without the ability to, actually, this is something we could do in Argo CD, right? Conceptually, when you create and ignore differences, you are delegating the control of that field to something else. And in Argo CD, you do that, but you imply it by setting the ignore field. You don't set an owner. So like something we could do in the near future is have, when you create those ignore fields, even just a label on them to say like, oh, this is actually a delegation to this thing. And there might be some way of creating, like a more generalized policy around that kind of thing, where it's like, oh, anytime somebody deploys a pod autoscaler, we're going to automatically ignore differences on the replicas to the fields that it has configuration for. There's things like that we could do that would be really smart inside of Argo CD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually want to be able to say, hey, run this service in Europe or North America under 100% error rate, under $100 a month. That's what I want to be able to say.
And maybe have it dynamically change where it's deployed
exactly
based on the cost of running services at that time of day. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to be an Argo CD job. I think that's a separate.
Yeah, well, in Argo CD could be involved. I think you've put it really well about you don't want every little thing to be in Git. Like, to me, GitOps is about humans. We're communicating via Git as an interface, and it's awesome to communicate through because there's so much tooling built around it. And if it's useful to have an AI to communicate to you, hey, here's your deployment manifest. Here's how it's going to save you money, changing it from this to that. Do you want me to proceed? Then, that it's a fantastic combination of Argo CD and GitOps plus AI workflows. If you'd rather just have it done for you, keep it out of Git, put it in a controller, and just let it run. You just have to be very confident that the system functions really well, because you don't want to hand off something and then end up, losing traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Ruvital, we're coming up on the end of the show.
We didn't even talk about relationship between platform engineers and software developer. So that will be maybe another episode.
Yeah,
it's a big
maybe
topic.
We could have a group therapy session around that one.
True.
So Ruvital, as we come to the end, what do the people need to know? And thank you again, Michael, for joining us. I think that was a fun discussion, and hopefully people want more of it. We'll come back and do a part 2.
So first of all, subscribe here, Argo Unpacked. In the website, we have all of the previous episodes, all of the upcoming episodes, and it's not the video of the week, but every 2 or 3 weeks, we're showing a different fantastic short that we have generated thanks to the show. We also have our social, LinkedIn, X, and Blue Sky. Stay tuned, subscribe. We have our YouTube channel. We recently generated a lot of very nice shorts. So check them out.
Oh, that reminds me, Ruvital. Today's Argo tip is brought to you by GitOps Champions, because that's where the conversation started. It's the Discord that when you sign up for the GitOps training and certification at learning.codefresh.io, you get an invite to a Discord where we talk all about GitOps and implementation. It's full of practitioners. So feel free to join the GitOps Champions Discord, because that's where that conversation came from. And that's why we actually talked about it this week. And then I'll also add, Ruvital, that right after KubeCon North America, we're going to be doing a recap, an Octopus Deploy webinar recap on Tuesday, November 18th. We'll share a link to this, but it'll be John and I talking about what we just kind of the findings from KubeCon. And then we'll be back with another episode of Argo Unpacked on December 1st. So plenty more coming up, lots to do. And definitely, we're going to be heading into 2026. I think it's going to be the year of GitOps, the year of magical, wonderful platform engineering and Kubernetes deployments for everybody. So any final words, Michael? Anything you need to promote or put out there?
Shout out to Intuit and my team for making Argo as awesome as it is. Go try Source Hydrator, alpha feature in Argo CD. I think it's going to be a huge improvement for platform engineering in GitOps. And we didn't really get into it much, but check out GitOps Promoter. It's something my team's been working on a lot to make environment promotion in GitOps as seamless as the rest of GitOps.
Yeah, check all those things out and file your taxes with TurboTax. Tax season is going to be coming up soon. Get those receipts in order. If you want to expense this show, you could for professional development, but unfortunately it is free. So it's going to be very limited in its usefulness as a tax vehicle. At least that's my understanding, Michael.
Yeah, I think that's legally correct. Not legal advice, though. All
right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on another episode of Argo Unpacked. Stick around and hang out in our chat, or I should say on the social media. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you all next time. And hopefully a lot of you will see in Atlanta next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.